Prabhupada ki jai. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and purports by Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Canto 2, ¿ya están grabando?
Yes.
Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 35. So, Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu, so the Lord in all beings, Lakshita, is recognized Swa Atmana, along with one's own self. In other words, when we actually realize Krishna, we also realize ourselves. It's not that we realize ourselves but not Krishna, or we realize Krishna but not ourselves. Drishyar buddhyadivir drashta lakshanayar anumapakai. So, Drishyar means by things that are visible, by what is seen. Buddhyadivi, by intelligence, etc. Drashta, one who sees. Lakshanai, by different signs. Anumapakaihi, by hypothesis. So let's see how Prabhupada translates this, and then we'll chant it. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is in every living being, Sarvabhuteshu, along with the individual soul, Swatmana. Along with one's own self. Vishyar Bhutyadi Bir Drashta. And this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. That's the acts of seeing, Drishyai, which literally means by visible things, and Buddhyadi Vir, by intelligence, etc. Drashta, Lakshanai here, by different signs. Anumapakai, and by hypotheses. Anumapaka is anuma. Ma means to measure. So anyway, I won't go into all the technical details. But it means by sort of measuring things, taking the measure of things, analyzing things properly. So anyway, let's chant this. Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu.
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu.
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu.
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu.
Lakshitak Swatmana Hari.
Lakshita Swatmana Hari.
Drishyar Buddhyadi Virdrashta.
Vishya Puja Nipirdrashta.
Lakshanairanumapakaya
Lakshanaramapakai
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu
Bhagavan Sarvabhuteshu
Lakshitak Sadmanahari
Lakshita Svatmanahari
Drishyai Buddhyadi Bir Drashta
Drishyar Pujani Virdrashta
Lakshanairanumapakaya.
Lakshanaramapakai
Try your luck.
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu
Lakshita Svatmana Hari
Lakshita Sadmanahari
Rishyar Putyati Birdrashta
Drishyai Buddhyadi Bir Drashta
Lakshanara Nukampahai
Lakshanairanumapakaya
Bhagavan Sarvabhuteshu
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu
Lakshita Svatmanahari
Lakshita Sadmanahari
Drishabhujadi Virdrashta
Drishyai Buddhyadi Bir Drashta
Lakshanaranumapakai
Lakshanairanumapakaya
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu
Lakshita Svatmana Hari
Lakshita Sadmanahari
Rishyar Putyati Birdrashta
Drishyai Buddhyadi Bir Drashta
Lakshana Numapakai
Lakshanairanumapakaya. It's all faulted.
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu
Bhagavan Sarva Bhuteshu
Lakshita Swatmana Hari
Lakshita Sadmanahari
Jisya Bhuri Adi Viridrasta Drashta
Drishyai Buddhyadi Bir Drashta
Lakshanaya Numapakai
Lakshanairanumapakaya. So, Bhagavan, so the Lord, Sarvabhuteshu, in all beings, Lakshita is recognized. Lakshana means a symptom or some visible sign by which something is recognized. Just like, for example, when the horizon starts to become illuminated, you know the sun is rising. So Lakshana is a visible or perceptible symptom or sign of something. And then Lakshita means something's recognized by its perceptible qualities. So the Lord in all beings is perceived, in other words, is recognized, Satmana, by one's own self, by one's own soul, Hari. So in a sense, this is a very important epistemological statement, because for every perceptible object, there must be some process of perception. For example, we don't see colors with our ears. And so, I mean, for everything which is knowable in the world, there is a particular organ, there's a particular sense or particular faculty which is made to perceive it. And so, so the Lord in all beings can be recognized, perceived by one's own soul. In other words, it begins in that way, that intuitive understanding that there is a God, that, or the understanding that Krishna is in my heart, or somehow or other, it's in every sense of my rational self-interest to follow Krishna and not set out on my own as if I'm going to conquer the universe or understand the universe or even survive the universe. So that's so by one's soul, by one's own soul, Swa Atmana, Hari, Bhagavan, the Lord, is recognized, is ascertained to be in all beings. And then it said that in the third line, that the soul is a drashta. The soul is a seer. I mean, Lakshana or Lakshita and Drishta are synonyms, actually. I mean, not exact synonyms, but one means to recognize something by its characteristics. The other one means to see something. So Drashta is the seer by visible things. So Drishya is something that's called the gerundive in Sanskrit. It means that which is to be seen. which you can also form by saying Drashtovya or something. Anyway, there's three ways to form the gerundive, but never mind that for now. So Drishyayar means by things which are to be seen, which are buddhiyati bir. So intelligence is something which can be perceived in the sense of, for example, people are talking and someone's trying to convince someone else, and the other person says, "Okay, I see it now. I see your point." That's a very common way of speaking. I mean, you're not literally seeing a point hovering in the atmosphere, but you see the person's point. And that's what's, in a sense, what the idea is here. So by things that you can see, that you can understand, uh, beginning with intelligence itself, one becomes a seer. This is very interesting. So the idea here is that it is by really getting in touch with your higher intelligence that you become a seer of truth. So that's what's stated here. And then Lakshanayar, uh, because intelligence has its sign, intuitive signs. For example, we can wonder, like, should I do this? Should I not do that? And you can think about it and think about it and think about it until you really see the truth. And so then it becomes recognizable to you. Lakshanayar, by all the signs, you can recognize it. And anumapaka, mapaka, ma means to measure, take the measure of something. So mapaka means sort of engaging in activities which will allow you to measure the real value of things. And so, anyway, causative noun there, but so that's basically what this verse is. So now, again, I'll read Prabhupada's translation. You see how Prabhupada rendered this. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is in every living being, along with the individual soul. And this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. So Prabhupada's purport, the general argument of the common man is that since the Lord is not visible to our eyes, how can one either surrender unto him or render transcendental loving service unto him? To such a common man, um, here is a practical suggestion given by Srila Sukadeva Goswami. It's interesting how Prabhupada's style, he wants to make sure that people respect these great devotees. So for Shuka, he's actually added 3 honorific titles, which are Srila, and then the suffix Deva, and then Goswami. And so these are things that you actually won't find in the Bhagavatam, although you will find glorification of Shuka. So Prabhupada sort of enclosed Shuka's name in all these honorific titles so that people have the right attitude and don't commit offenses. So actually, the Lord is not perceivable by our present materialized senses, but when one is convinced of the presence of the Lord by a practical service attitude, there's a revelation by the Lord's mercy, and such a pure devotee of the Lord can perceive the Lord's presence always and everywhere. So going back to Prabhupada's original argument, the general argument of the common man, but there's all kinds of things that aren't visible to us, like justice, like equality, like, all kinds of things. Moral laws, they're not visible in the sense you can't see them, but you know them by intuition. Intuition is a perception and understanding which bypasses logical arguments, or even you could say bypasses empirical studies, because you just know that certain things are right and wrong. Let's say, for example, a young person is out with their friends. Well, I'll give you a practical example of my own life. That when I was younger, I was I was at Berkeley in the middle of all the radical political activity, and I participated in different, I was sort of a self-righteous fool. But anyway, I participated in different kinds of left-wing political demonstrations and all that. And so at one point, it's interesting. It's very famous in the history of that time. It's called the People's Park incident. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
You were in New York and you heard about it.
Oh, yeah.
So it was there was a little park. It was just like, I don't even know if it was a whole city block, sort of a small city block. There's a park in Berkeley, maybe about 5 or 6 blocks from the campus. And so what happened is the hippies and the political radicals just sort of took over the park. They started growing food there, and homeless people could sleep there. And it was, I mean, in a sense, there was a nice intention. The smell of the park definitely went down. But anyways, that was People's Park, and I was in the middle of all that. And so then the problem was that the hippies and political radicals had just seized the park. They didn't go through any normal bureaucratic procedures. And so, can we turn that fan off now?
Yeah.
And so what happened is the Berkeley police just came in. So
It should be, yeah.
I think it's talking.
Yeah.
so the Berkeley police came in the middle of the night and cleared out all the homeless people and all the little shacks they put up, and just put a chicken wire fence all around the park, just sealed it off. And at that point, the students and other sort of radical people, they just, they did what they did well. They had a riot, and they closed down Telegraph Avenue. And anyway, this all ends actually in a Hare Krishna event. They closed down the street, it's the main student street in Berkeley. It goes right to the campus, and so there was at one point there was just some guy in a car. He must have been about my father's age. He was just some normal American coming home from work, and he couldn't cross. He needed to cross through Telegraph Avenue to get home, and he was like obviously not in a good mood. And so he just kind of pushed his. I mean, he didn't really endanger anyone, but he just sort of pushed through the crowd because he just to get home. And there was one guy there, one of the radicals, who I don't think was a student, but he pulled out this big knife, and he sort of slashed the tires, with the of this guy who was breaking through the barricade. And I remember I saw that, and I just knew in my heart this is not the way. Pulling out knives, like attacking people or attacking pride. It really, to use the expression of the time, turned me off. And I just thought, it's just not me. And then a little while later, I'd been to so many of these things. I just knew at a certain point it's tear gas time, because they brought in, the Berkeley police were kind of like, supposed to be educated and everything. You had to have a college degree to be a Berkeley policeman. The Oakland police, they would just, the story was they would just recruit these rednecks from Oklahoma and different places and bring in these big guys. So when the Oakland police came, you knew it was going to get very ugly. Anyway, so I just knew, okay, it's time for the tear gas. And so I just turned down a side street and, heard the tear gas canisters exploding and everything. I just wasn't in the mood to be tear gassed. And so, but then I ran into devotee, McCunlow, who's passed away actually, but was really a nice devotee, really eccentric. And he was just leading this little motley crew. They were doing a little kirtan. And it's funny because it was Berkeley and the hippies and everything. I don't think there were any two people in this little line, maybe a dozen people who were even dressed in the same century. There were like hippie girls wearing Victorian dresses, and there were guys. It was just like it was Berkeley at its finest. And he was singing Hare Krishna. I don't think anyone else was even singing that. I mean, everyone's kind of singing their own mantra, and he didn't even notice it because that was anyway. So I just went off of the kirtan party. But the point I wanted to make, the philosophical point I wanted to make, is that when I saw that the sort of that violent attack, or just sort of taking out this big knife, and in a very sort of angry, violent way, just uh, I just knew that that's just not the way to do this. It's not the way to do this. And so, how did I know that? I didn't see anything. And it gets back to Hume, the is and the ought. And so if you say you can't see God, there's all kinds of things you can't see, but you accept as true. There are many things that even atheist philosophers accept as true that they can't see. In fact, there are many things that scientists accept as true that they can't see. It was just, I mean, and you can do it wrongly. I was watching this podcast just a few minutes this morning where there was some scholar speaking about the problems of evolution. And of course, all the famous quotes from Darwin saying this is just a theory, there's all kinds of problems with it. And just, things you probably all heard about many times, just all the really, really serious problems with Darwinism or neo-Darwin views, which make it really not at all a scientific theory. It's just it's a physicalist theory. It's a religious idea more than it is something that's been proved. And so there's the whole world. That's the point I'm making in my own philosophical work, that there's a whole dimension, there's a whole world which is not empirical and which is the main world we live in. I mean, when people get married, they decide, okay, I want to be with this person. You can't empirically prove that. I mean, maybe live together for 40 years and then maybe you have some empirical evidence that it was a good match. But when you have that idea that I should be with this, or even a friend, if you have an idea that this person should be my friend, or this is right or that's wrong. I mean, most of the most important things in our life are not empirical. And so using that, and that means that either we are completely delusional and insane, or we actually have powers of intuition. One of those two things is true, that we actually have powers of intuition. And so if we have powers of intuition, and if we don't, then the whole nature and shape of human society is completely insane and absurd, including justice and all kinds of things. So, and if all these things are real intuitions, then that same real intuition can also perceive God. And so therefore it's actually philosophical cheating on the part of people that say you can't prove there's a God. Well, the most important things in everyone's life you can't empirically prove. And what is empiricism anyway? It's just talking about gross physical things and how they work. It's machinery. Empiricism basically studies machinery, cosmic machinery, but nonetheless machinery. It doesn't give you wisdom. It doesn't give you. I mean, if you look at, let's say, at a picture of the galaxy from the Webb telescope, and you're, as many atheist scientists are, you're filled with awe, but that awe is not empirical. You can say the universe is majestic, but majestic is not an empirical word. It's an aesthetic judgment. And aesthetics, by definition, are metaphysical. They're not empirical. You can't measure the majesty of something. And so if you think about it, physicalism basically ignores at least half, if not more than half, of reality as everyone lives it. So it's terrible philosophy. It explains very little. And it's just like, for example, medieval Christian theology. It didn't explain that much either. But if you didn't believe it, or at least say you believed it, publicly believe it. What you did privately is another issue. If you didn't publicly believe it, you'd be killed. And nowadays, if you don't publicly believe physicalism, your career will be killed. Of course, fortunately, so it's the same old game of coercing people into a specific worldview by threats and by punishment. It's not that physicalists are winning public philosophical debates. They're not doing that. They're just ridiculing, calling names, affirming that this is true. Like children, it's true. Why? Because it's true, and punishing those who are heretics. Of course, fortunately, history is going in the other direction now. So anyway, Prabhupada says that a devotee can perceive that intelligence is the form direction of the Paramatma plenary portion of the personality of Godhead, the form direction. Brahmacharya, did you explain that?
Yeah, that was a bewildering one to me. I don't know what form direction means.
Anyone want to try?
Where are we looking at?
Oh, that sentence at the top of page 127.
Pages. On the purport. Where is it?
The second, it's the first complete sentence. It says he can perceive that intelligence is the form direction of the Paramatma plenary portion of the Lord.
As I read it, it's like intelligence is given by Paramatma, and it's like intelligence is like a tangible way that Paramatma gives us guidance.
Yes, yeah. It's in the middle of the first paragraph of that purport. Actually, no, it's not in the middle. There's like almost a 2-page paragraph, which is to the credit of the editors. So, any comments on that? I think what you said is the form. Direction is easy to understand, and the form direction. Anyway, Reverend Tirth, any comment on that?
Not on form direction. I mean, it's just saying that by our intelligence, we can understand that there's a Paramatma, and that's a critical factor in the in dealing with physicalism. We in evolution we often talk about the missing link. Well, BBT once did a book, "The Missing Link is Consciousness," which is a true thing. That is the missing link. That's why Chalmers came up with the hard problem of consciousness. So his solution is vague.
Yeah. No, he sees a problem. He certainly doesn't have the solution. The presence of Paramatma in everyone's company is not very difficult to realize, even for the common man. The procedure is as follows. So here's the procedure to realize Paramatma. One can perceive one's self-identification and feel positively that he exists. Here's Descartes. He may not feel it very abruptly, but by using a little intelligence, he can feel that he is not the body. He can feel that the hand, leg, head, hair, and limbs are all his bodily parts and parcels, but as such, the hand, leg, head, etc., cannot be identified with itself. Therefore, just by using intelligence, he can distinguish and separate his self from other things that he sees. So the natural conclusion is that the living being, either man or beast, is the seer, and he sees beside himself all other things. So there is a difference between the seer and the seen. Now, by little use of intelligence, we can also readily agree that the living being who sees the things beyond himself by ordinary vision has no power to see or to move independently. All our ordinary actions and perceptions depend on various forms of energy supplied to us by nature in various combinations. And the proof is that we can lose that function of a particular limb or sense. Our senses of perception and of action, that is to say, our 5 perceptive senses, hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, as well as our 5 senses of action, namely hands, legs, speech, evacuation organ, and reproductive organs, and also our 3 subtle senses, namely mind, intelligence, and ego, 13 senses in all, are supplied to us by various arrangements of gross or subtle forms of natural energy. And it is equally evident that our objects of perception are nothing but the products of the inexhaustible permutations and combinations of the forms taken by natural energy. As this conclusively proves that the ordinary living being has no independent power of perception or emotion, and as we undoubtedly feel our existence being conditioned by nature's energy, we conclude that he who sees is spirit, and that the senses as well as the objects of perception are material. So the point is, Prabhupada said, first of all, if you think about it, here's the process that Prabhupada just went through. Number one, you think about it, do a Descartes. and I'm thinking, therefore I exist, I'm a person. Then you say, okay, my leg isn't thinking, my arm isn't thinking, and therefore I'm not these arms and legs. I'm not the physical body because I am the thinking thing. I'm the thinking person, and this body is not thinking. I'm conscious of the body, but the body's not conscious. For example, right now my foot is on the rug, but it's not like I'm seeing the rug through my foot. Of course, I'm perceiving the rug by the sense of touch. I can feel it if I focus my consciousness there. But still, I, the conscious being, perceive the floor beneath me, or I can see all of you. And so these senses are bringing information, perceptions back to consciousness, but that's me. I'm the center of this operation. I'm the consciousness that is working through the senses. And so, therefore, you can understand that we are not the body. Even when I reason, if I think about things, I'm using a faculty. There's a sense in which, even when I'm analyzing, reasoning, I'm not the analytic process. I am the consciousness that is in using that tool of buddhi. It's just like if you're hammering a nail, you're not the hammer and you're not the nail. You're directing consciousness to move your arm in such a way. So if you really, really meditate on yourself as the consciousness, you'll see that all these other things are somehow tools, instruments, things that you're using, engaging, but it's not you. You are the consciousness. That's you. So Prabhupada's saying by this simple introspection, one can perceive all these things. So maybe we'll read the rest of the purport tomorrow. Any questions?
I thought it was interesting that the verse was saying that this fact is perceived and hypothesized. I was like, hypothesize? That doesn't sound very definitive. So, but I looked it up, and this word anumapaka actually means inference.
Really? Where'd you look it up? Curious.
Sanskrit dictionary.
Oh, that's a good choice. Well, go ahead. What's your point? It's an interesting point.
Well, because I think inference is more definitive than hypothesis.
Mm. Well, inference is sort of, it just means that you believe you know one thing and then you infer from that something else must be the case.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think what Prabhupada ultimately means there, I believe that Prabhupada is not using these words in a technical philosophical sense. I think what he really means is just that you analyze it. He's using words like hypothesize. Based on the evidence, you come to what appears to you to be a rational conclusion. I think that's the way he's using that word. Do you have a dictionary? Could you read the meanings of hypothesize?
Well, hypothesis is when you.
A theory.
No, it's not a theory. A hypothesis is something that's not been proven. But
Well, that's what a theory is.
Well, a theory is proven.
No.
I mean, that's how we use it colloquially, but from material to scientifically, you can verify the theory or something.
Could you have a dictionary there? Read the word theory.
I'm saying it's used in that way, but from a scientific perspective, it's not a theory, something that is proven.
No, Brahmacharya, that's not true, is it?
No.
No, theory is
So
something
a
that's
theory
not
of
true.
relativity is not something that scientifically is verifiable.
Well, no, it doesn't mean, it's a theory.
Can someone just read it from the dictionary?
Okay, a coherent group of tested general propositions commonly regarded as correct that can be used as principles of explanation and for prediction of a class of phenomena. It's not a
Yes,
great
no, it's
definition.
tested.
Okay, and then go on to the next one. What's another meaning of
A
theory?
proposed explanation whose status, this is a good one, is still conjectural and subject to experimentation, in contrast to well-established propositions that are regarded as reporting matters of actual fact.
So we're both right. I mean,
Well, that's what I'm saying is that from a scientific perspective, theory means one thing. From a colloquial perspective, theory means another.
not colloquial, but just, I mean, it's more than colloquial. Like if someone says that's just your theory.
Yeah, that's how people talk.
Right, but that's also one of the important meanings of the word.
Yeah,
So,
but my point is that they inherently contradict one another. But theory,
But even in some-
is not in here. We're talking about hypothesis.
could you read hypothesis, BG?
Yeah.
Or anyone, or Jim?
Yeah.
I mean, even in scientific literature, people say things like, well, that's just a theory. That's not colloquial. I mean, if you can say the theory of relativity, but for example, they talk about laws of nature.
Yeah, my understanding is laws are the most certain. Theories are like, there's something for them, but they're not definitive. And then hypotheses are like educated guesses. If you test enough hypotheses, you might form a theory.
Well, theories are more complex. A law is like a simple statement of, of fact or observation.
Is that your experience?
No,
Go ahead.
Well,
Can you read hypothesis?
an assumption or concession made for the sake of argument, not very good. A tentative assumption made in order to draw out and test its logical or empirical consequences. That's how I would use it. So hypothesis, um, uh, um, I think this floor is made of oak. And then I test it to see if
Right.
it's really made of oak.
I mean, I basically agree with you that you could say a law, a theory, a hypothesis. Or is it you said that or
Yeah,
oh,
law, theory, hypothesis.
yeah, because I mean, even by scientists and philosophers, the word theory is not always used to mean something which is sort of accepted as proved. I mean, it's just not the way. I mean, like you said, like the theory of relativity, but and now, in fact, I mean, maybe one of the reasons is that they are discovering certain things. I think, which kind of is that true? That sort of compromise the theory of relativity.
There's some questions about it. I mean, it's a theory in that all the consequences of it have not been experimentally tested yet. So it's not converted to this is absolutely so. Einstein came up with a theory and a general relativity and specific relativity. Then in the late 20s, they actually were able to do one test of it during an eclipse and said, wow, space time does get warped in relation to gravity. And all of a sudden, he became world famous because there was a test that showed that one aspect of the theory worked. It still, at that point, was considered theory because there are many more things to test on it. But then it became what happens scientifically is becomes an accepted theory. Now, you point out in evolution, it became an accepted theory in spite of many difficulties because the alternative theory was also kind of difficult.
Religion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Adam and Eve one didn't also work very well.
All right. Do you want to come?
No, that was my only point, was that that was interesting that he used the term hypothesis.
I don't think Prabhupada's using these words technically.
No, that wasn't used.
I mean, this was also, yeah, I think Prabhupada never really, I mean, actually, he was a chemist in a sense, so he did do some science, but um, did you read the word hypothesis? Is there a second definition for hypothesize?
He read the two.
What's
He
that?
Well,
read
the-
both of them.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you know, and wait,
But I agree with you, the hypothesis is less than the theory.
We weren't talking about theories. The point I was making was that the word anumapaka actually means an inference, not a hypothesis.
Could you read the definition of inference? Because I think
It's never mind. Thank you.
a
I just
conclusion.
thought it was interesting, that's all.
it is interesting. The prob is using the words, but
In a conclusion or opinion that is formed because of known evidence, the act of passing from one proposition, statement, or judgment considered as true to another whose truth is believed to follow from that of the former. That sounds like a hypothesis too. I think.
well, because what Prabhupada is talking about here, what he just described, is that you introspect, you consider that I'm a conscious being, that I have my different limbs or my different senses, and then you infer from that, you hypothesize that, well, if that's the case, if I'm conscious and these other things are not me, then it seems like it's the case that I'm separate from these things. And so that's the inference. Again, Prabhupada, he definitely, there's no indication that he was a scholar of these things, that he's using these words in a technical sense.
Plus, the use of the words has changed over time too.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all very
Okay.
much.
A question.
Yeah.
What time tomorrow would you like to see Dear Govind?